you've been involved in our meetup at all, you know Mervin. He's been a member and organizer in the New York and New Jersey communities. He works for the WordPress. He's the director of WordPress Solutions, at RT Camp US. He's an awesome guy and he's a great presenter. And Mervin, why don't you take it away?
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. I cannot wait to get back into in-person meetups, but this past season, I've been really happy to get the chance to meet with a couple of folks from the community. I've spoken with folks in the New York City area and around the country, and I'm really happy to say that we're all thinking and starting to think about events that we can participate in person. So social hours, maybe coffee meetups, and I cannot wait. But tonight, I want to give you a rundown of hosting, and in particular, SpinupWP, because this in particular is it's a tool, it's a control panel dashboard application that accelerates the development process and just takes care of all of the infrastructure, back-end system admin stuff for developers and for sites that need to run very performant. Now, this sits somewhere in between your very own bare metal, and you have control over 100% of your application, and there's parts that are fortified, that are taken care of for you, so that you can enjoy the benefits of having an optimized WordPress setup. And I'll tell you all about it. But I'm a huge fan of Spinup. I use it both for development purposes and sandboxing, and I also use it as my production environment for some of the small and medium-sized websites that I help support. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I've got a few slides to share with you, and I've even got a couple of demo videos that I'm going to scrub through to show you the process of getting all of this up and running. But I hope that today's talk it answers a few questions about what types of hostings there are out there and what kind of control that each of those gives you, and that of course it introduces you to SpinupWP and what this flavor of a hosting and development environment looks like. As Steve mentioned, a very big thank you to Microsoft. We hope to get back to the Learning Center very soon and getting to meet in person in the near future. And another big thank you to SpinupWP and the friends at Delicious Brains, who have graciously given us good information, and they've also provided some bonus for us that I'll talk about later in the presentation. So a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about hosting. I'm going to take the developer's perspective. I'm going to look at what kind of control do I have as a web professional in a certain hosting environment. What can I do? What can't I do? And why this stuff matters. Things developers care about, and what do I need for tooling in order to do what I do best in developing, customizing themes and plugins. What do site managers care about? Why would SpinupWP be a good fit for a content person or for a site or store owner that has some capabilities to support their own bare metal? And I'll talk about what that actually means. Who should and shouldn't manage their bare metal? So when you're thinking about the hosting companies out there, you typically see the product as like managed WordPress hosting or full infrastructure content delivery network, CDN, for a WordPress website. Well, I'm going to show you what that spectrum is, what kinds of bare metal hosting, just service delivery hosting, what that looks like. And I've got a couple of demos planned for us as well. I want to take you on a brief tour of the SpinupWP dashboard so that you get to see the elegance of the simplicity. They only give you access to tweak and do the things that are WordPress relevant, the most important and most commonly edited controls over your WordPress environment from a server perspective. And I'll show you what it's like to provision a new site, connect it to a GitHub repository in a development workflow, deployment workflow, and lastly, how to push code to your SpinupWP WordPress instance. And as I mentioned, there's a bonus slide as well from our friends at Delicious Brains at the end. So with all of that, a quick intro on me. My name is Mervin Hernandez. As Steve mentioned, I've been a member of the WordPress NYC WP Jersey Press community for several years now. I'm incredibly proud to come up on, I think it's 3 years with RT Camp. I'm the Director of Client Solutions, and we work on humongous websites all around the world, especially around US. And Wingman WP is my independent development venture with me and a couple of collaborators and several of them community members here in New York City that we work on projects together, and it keeps me sharp so I can continue to learn and code as time allows. Feel free to ping me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, mervinhernandez.com /community. Does need to be dusted off on mervinhernandez.com, but nevertheless, I'm still active and around the community and returning. So let's dive into it. So just a quick debrief here. These are my opinions, my recommendations. Do your own research, and there's no affiliate links in here at all. So managed hosting. Let's talk about this for a few minutes. So when you talk to a hosting company, you look at GoDaddy, Bluehost, SiteGrounds, WP Engine, Kinsta, all of these great companies that do great stuff for WordPress and web applications. They do a lot. They do all of the server configurations. They provide excellent support for WordPress applications. They give you backup services, monitoring. They do a lot of security. They handle all of the stuff that none of us want to be experts in. None of us want to be an expert in information security for web applications. We don't care about SSRs and certificate authorities and networking and all of the stuff that makes the news for data breaches. We don't want to deal with that. We want our hosting company to take care of that. And likewise with backups, if our site goes down, we hope we don't feel it, it's recovered, and our hosting company is just Johnny on the spot and they're able to take care of it. And support is another big part of it. When you pay for a service, when you go and you pay, for example, for Wix or Squarespace, you expect them to be 100% on top of it. You don't want to worry about it. You just want to publish content. Or WordPress.com in our community in particular. You just want to publish content. And that's great. That's what those companies are meant to do. However, when you're a web professional, when you're starting to tinker, when you're starting to actually deliver services to customize applications, you need more control. Then the WP Engines of the world, then the Pantheons and the companies that have a staging environment for you, the companies that allow you to push and pull code from your various environments, then they really start to become important because they give you the control that you need to build your applications, to do what you need to do and tinker around behind the scenes in your sandbox to actually deliver good products, good services, and software development processes. So thinking about all of the awesome things that the hosting companies do for you, this is what we're going to be looking at, putting these pieces together and where they fit in and where does a SpinupWP fall into place versus a GoDaddy and, of course, the Wix and the Squarespace of the world. So let's look at that a little more carefully now. So here's, let's put it on a spectrum. Let's think about how much control do you want over your hosting environment and your applications. So let's put over on the far left-hand side, let's say you are a medium-sized big company. You want control over everything. I'm recalling like back in the early days before email was up in the cloud and all of these cloud services were really a thing, companies needed to have their own email servers on premises. You needed to have your own Exchange server box in your office in order to offer your mail server to your employees around your building. That's no longer the case, but let's think about that for a minute because you had to have all of your infrastructure. You needed to have your servers. You needed to have your static IP address. You needed to have your domain names and all of the email routing and your email servers all provisioned for your property in site. You had to manage all of that. So that is your hands-on. You want to do everything between your servers, your bare metal management, your operating systems updates, your networking, and you want to have applications on top of that. You want to have PHP, you want to have MySQL, you want to have Apache running on those servers and doing all of your web stuff. Now that is the extreme scenario. You have control over your entire stack. Now, what about other scenarios? What about the other extreme? What if you only want to publish content? You only want to deal with putting up articles, putting up images, media, and all you want to do is just publish. All right, well, then you don't want to deal with networking. You don't want to deal with security. You don't want to deal with domain mapping or any of that backend stuff. You just want to publish. And that's where the WordPress.coms. That is where the Wix and the Squarespace really fall into the other extreme where you do not have very much or any control at all over the server environment. You don't even know if it's Apache, Nginx, something proprietary. You don't know. You just put up your article, you put up your images, you put up your video links, and you hit publish. That is the other extreme. And the reason I put GoDaddy and Kinsta in here, because for the purposes of our analysis today, we're going to say that they give you less control than you need as opposed to the DigitalOceans and the Linodes. But so let's just look at the two extremes. So on the one side, you have your cloud providers. So this is the Google Cloud. This is the AWS, the various flavors of AWS, the Azures. You have to provision every single step of your stack. You have to say how much capacity you want, how many servers and what locations you want. You have to link them all together. You have to install operating systems, PHP, MariaDB. You have to do all of that. The other side, you don't do any of that. You just have a Wix application. You have a Squarespace application. You just use WordPress.com to deliver your content. And then you have the in-betweens. And that's where SpinUp really comes into adding value for the professionals that I don't want to deal with security. I do not want to deal with Apache, Nginx in my everyday workings and development. But I want enough control over my caching engine, over my database. I want to be able to run database operations in my command line. And I want to be able to provision as many sites as I want to and iterate and push and pull code as I see fit. On the one hand, hands-on, I don't want to manage the full stack, but on the other hand, I don't want to go with a proprietary system that I can't push and pull code unless I become an employee of Squarespace, for example. So now we come to the SpinupWPs. And SpinupWP, I have many generalizations, but let's make it a cPanel replacement. If you're familiar with the vanilla hosting that's available from like GoDaddy and Bluehost, they give you a control panel with tons and tons of features and tons of things that you can change for your server environment and your website's provisioning. Where SpinupWP really comes in is, although it's managing your bare metal, so you still need a vanilla Linux box, and then you put SpinupWP on top of it as a control panel, it gives you enough control over the things that you want to edit and manage as a WordPress developer and a WordPress professional without the burden of dealing with certificate authorities, with dealing with Apache or Nginx, in this case, versions, the operating system, managing Ubuntu distros for every version that comes out and patches. So it gives you enough control over that to make you feel comfortable and to give you enough access to your root that you can really mess around if you really wanted to, but you don't have to. I don't have to touch Nginx configurations unless I really, really want to, and I want to take something really far apart. Otherwise, I can work with enough control over my WordPress environment, my database environment, my themes and plugins, that I have just enough of a grasp to really work comfortably, to have my debugging tools and have a professional workflow between myself, my collaborators, and a GitHub workflow, which I'll also talk about today. That is the beauty of SpinupWP. And here I put a couple of acronyms. So if you're familiar with the business, there's information as a service, there's software as a service, platform as a service. Those are the acronyms here. And let's put SpinupWP kind of in the power user, pro developers type of a category. So again, you don't have the requirement that you have to touch your operating system. You don't have to go into your Linux environment unless you want to. You don't have to touch Nginx unless you want to, but you still have access to your command line. You have access to your WordPress controls, themes, and plugins, and of course, all of your code and file systems. This is the spectrum of the hosting companies and where they fall into giving you enough control. Now let's make it even simpler for you, because you're looking at this and you see acronyms, you see controls, you see different things. What if you want to get into the restaurant business? And I wish I could take credit for this analogy. I cannot. This is from our VIP, WordPress VIP friends. Somebody came up with this and it's fantastic. So you want to get into the restaurant business. All right, fine. You need a kitchen. You need somebody to clean dishes. You need somebody to make recipes, to cook. You need wait staff. You need ingredients. You need pricing. You need a building. Okay, fine. All of those are well and good. And if you're an entrepreneur and you want to manage the whole thing, okay, you're going to go scout a real estate property. You're going to go hire staff. You're going to start to compose a menu, so on and so forth. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to be a fantastic host. You want to try out things and you want to just cook. This is very much the same analogy here. So what do you want to do? How hands-on do you want to be? Do you want to have control over your building? Who cleans it? Who cooks? Who is your personnel? Or do you just want to work in the kitchen? Or do you just want to be the restaurant owner? You want to have enough influence over things to control and change things, but you don't have to be the one that's managing the day-to-day operation. So this is kind of the same analogy. How much cooking you want to do? How much business management do you want to do? And that's what the different, this is where we're drawing the comparison to the IaaS, the PaaS, how hands-on you want to be with your server environments. All right, well, who cares, Mervin? What does this all mean? Why do we care? Why don't I just go with the best host right now and call it a day? Well, that's fine. If you're a site manager, if you're a maintainer, a support provider, in many cases, I don't care who you're hosting with. If you just need me to do something on your site, I do it. But if you're coming to me for a WordPress application, if you're allowing me to have enough control and influence about where you host it, how I develop it, how your roadmap gets put into practice, then I want my say, I want my control over these things. So let's look at the developer and what the developer cares about, and let's look at what the site managers care about. So the developers, which is kind of the sweet spot that I'm talking to here, and why I'm so excited about SpinupWP is because for developers, it gives you just enough control while still taking care of all of the backend stuff. So here, it gives you enough control. I mentioned you don't have to touch the OS. You don't have to touch your application, your Nginx web application, but if you want to, you can. This takes care of all of the foundation stuff. So I have my bare metal configured. It has an operating system. It has a distro. It has all of the information that it needs to run Let's Encrypt really fast and give me SSLs for new sites. I can provision new sites. So all of that groundwork for me to work in WordPress is all taken care of. Easy to provision. This is a biggie. This is a biggie, and I'll actually demo it if I get the chance. You get to just type in your name, the site name, the URL, your database credentials, what version of PHP you want, and you get to deploy WordPress that easily. That's really it. There's really no frills about it, and that's the beauty of it. You get to connect it to version controls. You get SSH access to your server environment. You can run CLI commands and actually work with your database with search, replace, and all of the import-export stuff that you need as a developer. You have access to WP debug, your caching engine, your database, your file systems. You have all of that control for when you need it. So it's a generalization, but SpinupWP replaces the need for cPanel and WHM, and it replaces it in the best way because it keeps giving you the control you want and you need without the bells and whistles that are associated with all of the other stuff that comes with WHM. I'll give you one example. There's no email handling in SpinupWP because that's not WordPress related. You can handle emails with Amazon, you can handle emails with POP, with SMTP. They don't care. It's a WordPress application. That's what they're focused on. So whatever you want to handle your emails with, you handle that outside of Spinup. But anyway, I'm beside the point. It replaces cPanel by keeping all of the stuff that's important for your developers. Really quick, for site managers, what do they care about? In general terms, they just want to know that their site is up, that their site is secure, that there's backups going on, that they're able to recover quickly, that their security certificates or that their themes and plugins are up to date. And that's all well and good, and SpinUp delivers for them as well. It gives you a rundown of a dashboard. Hey, your site's doing all right. It's backed up. You have this many plugins that you need to update. Your WordPress core needs to be updated. And it also gives you statistics on your server environment. If SpinupWP they do a fantastic job of this. If they say, hey, we have applied certain patches to our distro of Ubuntu, just reboot your server and you'll get the latest version deployed. And it's really that easy. And that's the stuff you want. It's like, I don't want to keep up with Ubuntu and Linux distros. That's what SpinupWP is doing for us, and the tuning specific to WordPress. So site managers don't care about that. They just want to know that their site is working and it's fast. And that's where SpinupWP is really great. So for starters, they're obsessed about WordPress. They focused so much of their attention in building this application for WordPress specifically, and it shows. It is really elegant, it is really simple, and again, it brings that power to the developers to do what they need to do. You have that SSH access. CLI is baked in. You have all of the server controls with keys management. And it's fast. It works fast to deploy new sites. It delivers sites really fast. They lock down enough about the server environment that you don't have to worry about your sites going down or having overcapacity. You get to see all of the squigglies over in your DigitalOcean or your Linode side of your bare metal management. So there's so much value for web professionals that it's really, really cool, and it delivers for both developers and site managers. Now, here's the elegance. Now, you might be asking, where does this actually come into play? So let me show you in a couple of the GUI areas that this really shows, and it's in the dashboard. It's the simplicity and the bare bones of what you need to do for WordPress in your dashboard. And I'll take you really quickly through some of these screens. So here's, I created a vanilla instance for us and tested some things with deployment here. And here's all of the controls that you have just at a glance of your sites list. So I'm a WordPress professional. I only work with WordPress applications. What are the things that I really need to do with a site? Well, I need to back it up. I want to clone it. I might want to set or clear file permissions, and that's kind of it. I don't need to do much else. I don't need to look at all of my statistics here. I can do that in external tools and Metric and other analysis. But I just need to look at my sites. I need to know if they're backed up, if they're up, and that's all I really care about at a high level. But what about at the site level? So at the site level, you get to see at a glance if it's connected to a GitHub repository, if there's any updates for plugins that need to happen. Do I have basic or authentication controls so that it's like a staging environment that I don't want anybody to have access to? I want to put an HTTP authentication. You can do that right here very quickly. Do I have page caching enabled? You can view that very quickly. My SSL is up to date. That's it. There's so many controls that cPanel gives you that it can be overwhelming, like domain routing, email controls, statistics about your server. It's like that is not something that every developer needs all of the time, in particular for WordPress development. So all of that is stripped away, and you have the controls for the most relevant areas of WordPress that you need here at a glance. Going down the left-hand side navigation really quickly, here's your settings. What are my settings? Just my PHP version, my domains. Do I want to set up a redirect for www? That's kind of it. That's all I really care about. Page caching on and off. I keep it off for anything that I'm doing in development. I only turn it on for production environments in my case. SSL. SSL is completely effortless in SpinupWP. So long as you point the DNS over to it, you just click it and forget it. Nginx controls, again, you have controls here in the GUI, and you also have CLI controls over your configurations for Nginx if you want to tweak things. Your SSH users, every site, you have the ability to SSH into it. You have the ability to run WP commands on every site, and you get to manage your keys. You can grant and revoke controls and access to each site individually. All of that is managed very, very optimally with SpinUp. You get to connect it to Git. That's it. There's not a lot of frills and bells and whistles in here because you don't need it. If you're a site manager, you want analytics, you want tracking, you want much more statistics, use New Relic, use Google Analytics. You don't have to have all of that in your cPanel, or in this case in SpinupWP, just cluttering up, gumming up the works. You just want to work. You just want WordPress laser focused optimization, and you've got it with SpinupWP. Now, behind the scenes, you might think well, Mervin, this is running on super hardcore bare metal, and I've got a souped up computer running all of my sites behind here. Well, not quite. This is one of my live sites right now, and all it's 2 gigs of memory, 50 gigabytes of disk space, and how many CPUs? I don't know the CPUs. I think it only got 2 CPUs. So that's it. It's not a souped up supercomputer running my 12 or 15 sites that I have on each one of these servers. And the reason why this is so performant is because it is so tuned to WordPress. It's like there's nothing else running on that server. There's no WHM doing all of its WHM things behind the scenes. There's nothing else Nginx is doing besides serving up these sites and doing exactly what SpinUp has told it. These are the priorities on how to do WordPress very, very fast. So here in the last couple of minutes I've got left, I want to take you through, I would just want to scrub through a couple of videos on what I did to provision these sites very quickly, I might add, and connect them to my development workflow. So I use Git in order to code customizations, break themes apart, create child themes, enhance plugins, and create features for my clients. And we work very much the same way in big WordPress. RT Camp and all of the big WordPress agencies, they have a version controlled system. Whether you're working in WordPress VIP or Pantheon or WP Engine, sites that need that kind of testing, there's multiple people coding into applications, you have to have these good systems in place. So you can apply that as a microcosm once you get to, you start touching larger and larger applications, and you want to do things well documented and create good patterns of how to deploy things. So what did I do to get my sites up and running on SpinupWP? Well, for starters, the process to create a server in SpinupWP could not be simpler. You have a Linode account, you have a DigitalOcean account, and from SpinupWP itself, you can attach it to your DigitalOcean account, and then you can select your server instance resources, how big of a CPU, RAM, disk space you want, and SpinupWP will take care of all of the baseline configuration. That's only a one-time thing. After that, creating a site is just as easy as I'm going to show you now. So I created my GitHub repository. I put WordPress on it. I got my database credentials from my SpinupWP screens, and you'll see how quick that is. I enabled the GitHub attachment. I took a coffee break, and then it was live. Let me just show you that right now. So setting up a new Git site. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that this, it took me a few minutes because I was documenting it, but with that checklist that I just made, and also their documentation, which is very, very good, you can go through this very, very quickly. And if you don't attach a new site in SpinUp to a GitHub repository, the process is no more than 5 minutes. It truly is a 5-minute WordPress instance once you're up and running with your server connection. So as I mentioned, I created my GitLab repository. I slapped WordPress onto it. I then pushed from my local environment up to the GitHub repository, the image of WordPress with the configuration. And then I came back to SpinupWP to finish the setup process. And this is so cool. Again, they've drilled it down to exactly the parameters that you need to change for every site. So you type in your database name, you get given a database password for each instance of your of each site that you create. Next, you get to select the PHP version. I'm sorry, yeah, that's right. Yes, the PHP version. And from that, in this case, I wanted to attach it to a GitHub repository. So it gave me my parameters to punch into the WP config file. Following that, once I told it, yes, I'm ready to go, this is the darn coolest screen in SpinupWP. I won't play it for you in real time, but I promise you it will only take 4 minutes and 30 seconds on average to complete a deployment. So depending on how many sites you've got on your server, that it might vary, but it really goes through the checklist, and it's quite satisfying that in the time of a coffee break to see it configure PHP, map your domain, install WordPress, attach GitHub. It is very, very satisfying to see those checklists go down the list and to see your site provisioned before your very eyes in just a matter of minutes. SSL authentication. All of this has been automated, and I don't have to go through the individual steps. For example, in a cPanel by comparison, creating a database, setting up SSL, mapping a domain, uploading files. All of this has been taken off of your hands. You now are free to focus on creating a sandbox, cloning a site, coding, and working. That is the beauty of it. So I have successfully deployed vanilla.wingmanwp.com. I have attached it to a GitHub repository, which I have up in the cloud, and I'm able to view and edit code and push code to it. And in just a matter of moments, my site is available for me to log into for the first time and start configuring as we're all familiar with the WordPress process. It really is that simple, and once you're attached to a server, which you can attach to multiple servers in SpinupWP, the provisioning process for one site is incredibly easy. So this is the short man's list of what I did in order to create a site and attach it to a GitHub repository. And there's great documentation available from the Spinup crew as well. And now my last quick demo is how do you code and how do you push code to your environment? Well, now we're in a CI/CD GitHub development workflow, just like you would for any other application or any other GitHub repository. You can create branches, and you can click a setting, and this is why I wanted to do a video, is because I checked a box in the SpinupWP wizard where I told Spinup, oh yes, I do want you to automatically grab code that I push into the main branch. Yep, there it is. I want you to automatically grab code that I push into the main branch, and yes, anytime that you see code go into the main branch, I want you to deploy it into my my respective staging or production environment. And so the way that you code, that you do push changes into your site, is you just code. You code in your IDE, you can code in the cloud, you push to a branch, and you create a merge request to go into your respective server environment. So let's go there real quick. So here, I think I wanted to install 3 plugins. I wanted to install Limit Logins and Elementor. So that's what I'm highlighting here. I'm going to push a couple of I did push code from my local environment into my repository. And then I pushed it into a branch, which is another good practice. I didn't push it into my main branch. I pushed it into a sub branch. And now I'm creating a pull request to go from my local branch and development environment. Now I want it to go live into my Spinup instance. So I'm creating a pull request to go from one branch to another, and I'm going to accept that merge myself. If you're working with a team, then you might have a review process. You might have a collaborator that needs to look over your code, or some other testing parameters that you might have in your CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development workflow, in order to go into your main branch. But in my case, it's just myself, and this is just a sandbox. So I wanted to show you that all of this is happening with an audit trail in SpinupWP. So you get to see that it pulled the fact that I pushed into the main branch, and it automatically processed that code change and it deployed it into the environment. And then I can see my 2 plugins available for use in my production environment up in SpinupWP. So here you get plugged into your continuous integration, continuous development, GitHub workflow very, very fast, and you have a highly tuned WordPress specific setup for live and for development applications. As I mentioned, both live sites that either employ you to manage them and keep them up and develop things for them. You would be very happy to put them into an environment that you're familiar with, that you control, and that you have enough control over to do your own support, to support your clients really well. Hey, I know how to get into the code. I know what's going on. I can debug it. I am your support provider, and that's why you live in my house. You live in Mervin's SpinupWP. If you want to give that control over because you're not tweaking those behind the scenes aspects often, or don't need to develop in a continuous integration pipeline, fine, then hand it over to one of the WordPress optimized hosting companies. WP Engine is great. Kinsta is a fellow host of the Meetup often. They are very, very good. Pantheons and WordPress VIP and WordPress.com, another great place for your applications to live. But if you want this control, if you want to be the support branch of your customers and you're doing development, then this SpinupWP is one of the ways to go. So that's my talk, and that's my quick overview of what is so darn cool about Spinup and why I love it. In my case, I showed you DigitalOcean is what I have in the as my bare metal. You can deploy this on Linode. You can deploy this on any Linux available box that you can connect to over the internet, and you don't have to have a lot of resources. So this is a fantastic option if you're looking to get into a workflow with collaborators. If you want to get familiar with developing in the cloud, it's a fantastic option, and it's WordPress optimized, WordPress tuned. Our friends at Delicious Brains and SpinupWP have very graciously offered us a 25% offer code for anyone that wants to give them a try. You actually don't need anything to get started. You can deploy a site today. But if you'd like to give them a try for a little longer, they are giving you an offer code here. And if you haven't heard the recent news, they actually recently acquired ACF, so Advanced Custom Fields, Migrate DB Pro. They're now part of the Delicious Brains family, and these folks are fantastic, and they're investing tons and tons into the WordPress ecosystem. So that's my spiel. It is a fantastic tool. I love it. I'm going to keep putting all my customers and driving them to letting me manage their environments and for me deploying them on SpinupWP, because I have all of the tools that I need there. But with that, I'll stop talking. I hope this has been informative and encouraged you to look at what control you need. If you want to learn about CI/CD and where you might deploy stuff, it's a great place to learn, and they have great documentation as well. So thank you again to Microsoft. Thank you, Steve, for having me, and I'll take any questions that come around.
All right, Mervin. Well, that was an unbelievably detailed presentation. So it was so good that we have absolutely no questions, which is pretty impressive. I'll ask a couple. Number one, you don't work for WP, right? I mean, you did such a great job talking about this product. You don't work for them. You just love the product.
I do not work for SpinupWP, and they are not affiliated with me, with RTCamp. They're just a community service, and I'm a big fan of it.
Great. Just also be clear, you pay for SpinupWP. You also need to pay for like a DigitalOcean account or something separately, correct?
That's right. So let me dive into that, because I did not answer that very carefully. So SpinupWP, in very general terms, it replaces your cPanel WHM. So you do need to have your own physical server in order to provision SpinupWP and WordPress on top of it. So that does require you to set up an account with a physical server company. That can be that can be a cloud provider. It can be AWS, it can be Google Cloud, but for the providers that SpinupWP recommends and the ones that they're attached to in a very simple way are DigitalOcean and Linode. If you work with one of those, they're very cost effective. They give you tons and tons of options, but for the purposes of our presentation, they're very easy to attach to SpinupWP and have SpinupWP provisioned on top of those. So yes, you do need your own bare metal, so you have to go with DigitalOcean or somebody that can give you a Linux instance that you can run SpinupWP and WordPress on top of. Again, that price may vary depending on how much beef you want on that instance. I think my instances, the ones that I showed on screen today, I believe they're about $10 or $15 a month each, and they're presently supporting roughly 10 or 15 sites each. So just a quick example, yes, you do need your own bare metal.
All right. Any other questions? Any other questions for Mervin? Those are my questions. Anyone else? Dude, that was a great presentation. Seriously, no questions. It was very detailed. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have one more. Whoa, there we go. Mervin, you there?
Still here.
All right. Sorry, Laura. We have a couple of some questions here. Michelle's asking, how many sites do you think can run on a 48 gigabyte of RAM and 12 CPU server?
Oh goodness, that's quite a bit.
Okay.
That's quite a bit. So that's a pretty big server. As you saw on screen, one of my instances has, I believe, 2 CPUs. It has 2 gigabytes of memory and 50 gigabytes of disk space, and that's relatively small. As I mentioned, that's about $15 a month for a single instance of that size, and that one in particular, I think presently has 10 sites that are relatively small. I have an identical instance that I have 2 or 3 medium-sized e-commerce, WooCommerce sites. So the specs that you just mentioned are quite big. If you're using SpinupWP, if you're using its respective Nginx, and you're using WordPress on top of that, you should see very different performance metrics, and you can see all of these analytics in your DigitalOcean dashboard. When you're using a highly optimized setup like Nginx flavor from SpinupWP, you'll see that your resources go a lot further. So you're not running a big WHM instance that has a lot of bulk. This is very, very tuned. You don't have to have a lot of muscle to do a good setup for WordPress. So,
Perfect. Is it easy to upgrade? Like, could you start? Is it recommended to start small, and then is it easy to upgrade your instance?
It is. You can go up. In the case of DigitalOcean, which I'm familiar with, you can upgrade. You can only go up. You can add CPU. You can add RAM. You can add disk space. And if you so desire, you can do so and create more instances or upgrade your instances. However, you can also move sites from one server to another within SpinupWP incredibly easily. So if you have one site that is completely blowing up your server because they just went viral, you can move that one site into its own bare metal instance of Linux, and SpinupWP will help you do that very, very easily. You can also upgrade your instance's resources, yes.
Great. All right. Officially, thank you very much. I think that's all for today, but that was great. I think that makes a lot of sense. Start small and move up.
Yes.
All right.